Let me start by breaking a promise the internet keeps making you. You've probably seen the videos, the ones that say trauma turns you into some kind of genius, that pain rewires your brain into a superpower, that the worst things that ever happened to you secretly made you smarter than everyone around you. I need to be honest with you. That's not true. Trauma doesn't raise your IQ. It doesn't hand you a rare intelligence that other people will never have. But here's the part that almost nobody tells you, and it's the reason I'm making this video. The truth is actually more interesting than the myth. Because while trauma doesn't make you smarter, it does something else, something real, something scientists have spent decades measuring. It changes how you read the world. It rewires what you notice, what you fear, who you trust, and what you're willing to fight for. And some of those changes, painful as they are, can quietly turn into the most valuable things about you. Not magic, not a gift, adaptations. Survival skills your mind built when it had no other choice. Hey, I'm Core, and today we're going to walk through 9 of these adaptations, one by one. I'll tell you what's really happening in your brain. I'll tell you where the popular version gets it wrong. And I'll tell you the cost, because every single one of these comes with a cost. And by the end, I want you to understand something about yourself that I think you've been waiting a long time to hear. So stay with me, especially for the last one, because it's the one most people mistake for a flaw. Let's begin. Adaptation 1. You read rooms before anyone says a word. You walk into a space and you just know. Someone was arguing before you got there. Someone's smiling, but they're not okay. There's a tension under the surface, and you feel it before a single word is spoken. This isn't intuition in the mystical sense. It's something psychologists call hypervigilance, and we understand it pretty well. When a child grows up in an unpredictable or unsafe environment, the brain's alarm system, especially a small region called the amygdala, gets tuned to detect threat faster and more easily. Brain imaging studies on people who experience childhood adversity show this exact pattern. Heightened reactivity to angry or fearful faces. So your brain learned to scan. A tightening jaw, a glance away, a change in someone's breathing. You catch it instantly, because once upon a time, catching it kept you safe. But here's the cost, and I won't skip the cost in this video. This system isn't a superpower. It's an alarm that's stuck on. It produces false alarms. It exhausts you. It can leave you anxious in rooms that are perfectly safe. What helped you survive then can wear you down now. That's not a flaw in you. That's a smoke detector that never learned the fire is out. Adaptation 2. Your empathy runs deep, but it's complicated. There's a comforting story online that says suffering automatically makes you more compassionate. And there's real science behind part of that. Researchers Daniel Lim and David DeSteno ran studies showing that people who'd been through more severe adversity tended to feel more compassion for others in pain. And crucially, they acted on it. They gave more. They helped more. The suffering had built a bridge to other people's suffering. But I promised you honesty, so here's the other half. It doesn't always work that way. For people carrying chronic, long-term trauma, especially from childhood, empathy can actually become blunted or scrambled. One study of women with PTSD from childhood trauma found their empathy wasn't simply higher, it was altered. They felt more personal distress, but had a harder time stepping into someone else's shoes. So this isn't a clean gift. It's a deepening that goes one of two ways, depending on what you've lived through. If you came out of pain more able to sit with someone else's, that's something rare and worth protecting. But it's a capacity you cultivated, not a prize trauma handed you. Adaptation 3. You get strangely calm when everything breaks. Everyone else is panicking. The emergency is unfolding. Voices are rising. And you feel something almost cold settle over you. Clarity, order. First this, then that. Call this person. Handle that thing. Part of this connects to an idea called stress inoculation. The psychologist Donald Meichenbaum showed that controlled, manageable doses of stress can build up your coping skills, almost like a vaccine teaches your immune system. And there's a fascinating large study by researcher Mark Seary that tracked thousands of people over years. He found something surprising. People with some adversity in their past, not zero and not an overwhelming amount, but some, often coped better with new stress than people who'd had none at all. Read that carefully, because the internet always gets it wrong. The key word is some, moderate. The relationship looks like a curve, not a straight line. A little hardship can build resilience. A flood of it does the opposite. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger is not a law of nature. For a lot of people, it just hurts. But if you found that you steady yourself when the storm hits, that you become the anchor while others spin out, that is a real, earned capacity, and no business school teaches it. Adaptation 4. You can't help analyzing people. Someone treats you badly, and your first move isn't anger. It's a question. Why did they do that? What are they protecting? What happened to them? You replay conversations. You notice the words someone chose, the topic that made them look away. You read people like a book you can't put down. And it makes you more forgiving than most, because you keep finding the wound underneath the behavior. This grows naturally out of that early threat detection we talked about. When understanding people was the difference between a calm day and a bad one, your mind became a pattern machine. You learn to model what's going on inside other people fast. The cost? You can't switch it off. You see the loneliness behind the loud laugh, the strain behind the polished answer. Living that deep is meaningful, but it's also heavy. Sometimes you just want to take a person at face value, and you can't. Adaptation 5. That gut feeling you can't quite explain. Everything seems fine. The person is friendly, says the right things, smiles at the right moments. But something in you goes quiet and uneasy. You can't name it. You tell yourself you're overthinking, and then weeks later, you find out you were right. I want to be careful here, because this is where pseudoscience loves to take over. This isn't a psychic gift. What's most likely happening is that your threat detection system, the one we keep coming back to, is picking up tiny inconsistencies below your conscious awareness. A mismatch between someone's words and their micro-expressions. You don't have the proof yet, so it surfaces as a feeling instead of a thought. And here's the honest caveat. This same system gets it wrong all the time too. You'll feel that unease about people who are perfectly safe. Trauma makes the alarm sensitive, and sensitive alarms catch real threats and imaginary ones. So trust the signal enough to pay attention, but not so much that you convict people without evidence. Adaptation 6. You trust slowly and only a few. You're not collecting friends. You watch people. You notice how they treat someone who can't do anything for them, whether they keep small promises. You're running a quiet background check before you let anyone close. There's a researcher named Jennifer Freyd who developed something called betrayal trauma theory. The core idea is that when the people we depend on are the ones who hurt us, especially early in life, it reshapes how we handle trust at the deepest level. If the person who was supposed to protect you was the danger, your mind learns that trust itself can be hazardous. So you built a filter, and it protects you. But the same filter can lock out people who are genuinely safe, and it can make closeness feel like risk long after the risk is gone. The work, and it is work, is learning that careful trust is wisdom. But total walls are just the old fear wearing armor. Now, I want to pause, because there's one thing on almost every video like this that is flatly, scientifically wrong, and I refuse to repeat it. The one they always get wrong. Sensitivity is not a wound. You'll hear that being deeply sensitive, feeling music in your whole body, getting overwhelmed by bright lights or loud rooms or other people's moods is proof of trauma, that your pain made you sensitive. The actual research says something different. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent decades studying what she called sensory processing sensitivity, the trait behind the highly sensitive person. And here's the key finding. It's a temperament you're born with. About 15 to 20% of people have it. It's partly genetic. It shows up across the animal kingdom. It is not caused by trauma. Now, your environment interacts with it. A sensitive child in a harsh home may struggle more, and the same child in a warm home may flourish more than anyone. But the sensitivity came first. It's not damage. So if you're deeply sensitive, please stop treating it like a scar. It's part of how you were built, and in the right life, It's one of the best things about you. Okay, back to the adaptations. Adaptation 7. Stillness feels dangerous. You sit down to relax and your mind floods. Unfinished tasks. Next year. Things that might go wrong that haven't even happened. Doing nothing can feel worse than being busy. This is hyperarousal, the nervous system staying revved up long after the threat is gone. In an unpredictable past, quiet often came right before something bad. So your brain learned a brutal rule. I'm only safe when I'm alert, when I'm in control, when I'm doing. A quick note of honesty, because it matters for trust. There are very popular books and theories about how the body holds trauma, and some of them stretch the science further than the evidence supports. The careful version is this: chronic stress can leave your nervous system dysregulated, and that's real and measurable. Learning to feel safe at rest, to let your body believe the danger has passed, is one of the hardest and most healing things you can practice. Rest isn't laziness. It's how you refuel for a long road. Adaptation 8. You're fiercely, sometimes stubbornly, independent. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. Lose your job and you're updating your resume that same night. Something breaks, you'll learn to fix it yourself before you'll ask for help. This comes from a hard lesson learned early. If no one reliably showed up for you, your mind concluded that the only person you can count on is you. So you became resourceful in a way that genuinely impresses people. But the cost is real. Leaning on someone can feel like exposure, like handing them the chance to let you down. So you carry everything alone, even when you're breaking under it. The growth here isn't becoming dependent. It's learning that letting the right people help you isn't weakness. It's how humans were always meant to survive. Independence kept you alive. Connection is how you actually live. Adaptation 9. You cannot look away from injustice. This is the one people mistake for a flaw the most. You see someone treated unfairly, someone bullied, a wrong being ignored, and something in you ignites, even when it has nothing to do with you. People tell you to relax, to let it go. They don't understand why you take it so personally. There's a real area of research here. Scientists study what they call justice sensitivity, how strongly different people react to unfairness. And there's a related concept called moral injury, the deep wound that comes from witnessing or experiencing something that violates your core sense of right and wrong. I'll give you the honest nuance because it's important. Researchers find that this sensitivity isn't automatically a virtue. When it's rooted purely in being a victim, it can tip into suspicion and resentment. But when it points outward, toward protecting others, toward fairness for people who can't defend themselves, it becomes one of the most powerful forces a person can carry. A finely tuned moral compass, shaped by knowing exactly what injustice costs. The man who shows this best is Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps and lost almost his entire family. He came out and wrote that even when everything is stripped away, one freedom can't be taken: the freedom to choose your response, to find meaning even in suffering. He didn't let the horror make him cruel. He turned it into purpose. That's the direction this can go. So let me bring this home, because here's where the real science gives us something better than the myth ever could. There's a phenomenon researchers Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun named post-traumatic growth. And a large review of the research found that more than half of people who go through trauma report real, meaningful, positive change afterward. A deeper appreciation for life, closer relationships, a new sense of personal strength, new possibilities they never would have seen. But listen closely, because this is the part the inspiration videos skip. Growth is not the same as bouncing back. It's not a reward for suffering. It doesn't mean the trauma was good or worth it, or that you should be grateful for it. The pain was still pain. Plenty of people are harmed and never handed a single thing in return. And that is not a personal failure. Post-traumatic growth is something quieter and braver than the myth. It's what becomes possible when a person rebuilds meaning out of something that tried to break them. Not because of the wound, in spite of it. So no, surviving hell didn't make you smarter. It didn't give you a secret intelligence other people can never access. What it may have given you is something more human, and honestly, more impressive. The ability to read a room, to feel deeply, to stay calm in the fire, to protect the people you love, to know, in your bones, what fairness is worth. Those aren't proof that you're broken. They're proof of what you survived and what you chose to become afterward. The pain was not the gift. What you built from it is. You are not a wound walking around pretending to be a person. You're someone who walked through something hard and came out carrying both the scars and the strength. And you get to decide which one you point at the world. I'm Core. If any part of this landed, if you saw yourself in here, do me a favor and leave a comment telling me which adaptation hit closest to home. I read them, and other people in the comments need to know they're not alone in this either. If you want more videos that treat you like an adult and tell you the truth instead of selling you a fantasy, subscribe and turn on notifications, because that's the whole point of this channel. And be a little gentler with yourself today. You've carried more than most people will ever know. You're allowed to be proud of that. I'll see you in the next one.